Okay, we're back. We're live. It's Tuesday. Why not? On Tuesday, we should be back. You know, and we're happy to be here with Mike Fergus. He's with Fergus and Company. And we're going to talk about Reits today, and we'll talk about bill that's pending in legislature with Mike, because Mike knows a lot about that bill here on Community Matters, because community does matter. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us who you are, what you do for a living.
Okay. I have a company with my two sons, Alex and Jake, Fergus and Company, and we invest in commercial real estate. I started as a tax-oriented CPA in 1974 here, and then Andy Friedlander, my buddy, was my client, and he made me a partner in his company, in his management company, and I was first employee, and we started this management company, got me into the commercial real estate business. So since then, I've been investing in commercial real estate. Now my son Alex is running the business, and I'm sort of a senior advisor and working on different projects like this Reit project.
That's great. Okay, so then we're going to talk about the confluence. Last Thursday, and that would be April 16th, we had this really interesting program at Laniakea. It was one of our downtown forum lunch and panel programs. We called it Offshore Investment in Hawaii. How can we better manage it? And you know, the principle was, you know, there's a lot of offshore capital out there. Are we getting it? Are we getting our fair share? Are we doing what's right to get it? Are we managing it right? Because if you don't manage capital, you know, Lee Kuan Yew could tell us all about this in Singapore. If you don't manage capital, you don't make maximal use of it. It doesn't help your community the way it should, the way it could. And so, you know, that was the title of the program. We had 7 speakers. You were one of those speakers. And you spoke, you know, about various things. And before we get to the Reit issue, why don't you just give us a summary of your comments that day, last Thursday?
On the
on offshore investment.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely pro outside investment. I mean, we are a capital deprived state, no doubt about it. So we want to make it as easy as possible for offshore investors, whether they're from the mainland U.S. or Asia. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to invest in our community and help our community for the benefit of everybody in our community, and not just for the profit of the businessmen, but for employment and welfare of our community. And I think we do a pretty bad job of it, frankly.
In what ways?
Well, I think if you, you know, we will romance the investment, but once it gets here, like once it shows significant interest, like NextEra and you know, the ferry and all these other big projects, the telescopes that they're trying to build right now. Once they get their foot in the door, then all of a sudden all the special interests, you know, start talking to the politicians, and the politicians get cold feet and start putting impediments in the way of the investors to fulfill their, you know, their investment plans, and that's pretty discouraging for an investor. You know, we pretty much have a philosophy in our company to avoid any kind of entanglement with the government. We don't do business with the government. I don't want to do business with the government for these exact reasons, just because it's too difficult and it's just not worth it.
Yeah, interesting. You know, as a lawyer in my career, before I retired, I was often asked by investors from offshore whether they should invest here. You know, this is a really pregnant question. I mean, it's not that they would rely to their detriment necessarily on what you told them, but you wanted to give them a good answer. You wanted to give them the right answer. You were in the know and they weren't in the know. That's why they asked you the question. You know, generally, I found myself telling them they would regret it. unless they followed certain kinds of rules, which were very difficult to follow. And unless they had a set of circumstances, which was rare to have a set of circumstances that actually worked. Because if you look back down the trail, I mean, you're probably an exception. Well, you're local. You're local. That makes it very different because you're on the scene. But a lot of foreign investors, aside from straight real estate, right, buying a packaged product like a condo or a development project, you know, just sign here kind of thing. A lot of offshore investment has lost it. They have been skinned alive. And I think, you know, would you agree with me, Mike?
I totally agree with that. I think, you know, but And we work in the prepackaged area. You know, we buy existing buildings. We'll buy zoned land that's ready for a building. We just avoid anything that entangles us with the government. Anything that requires more than simple government approvals.
Yeah, one of the investors at the program last Thursday told me something which I think is really interesting. He said in 1961, Hawaii was an early adopter of the condominium statute. And the brilliant thing about a condominium is that it's like a certificate. It's like almost like it's not land so much as it's paper, and you get what's on the paper. You sign there. You're the owner. It's a great way to market real property. Great way to market it because there's not too many questions. It's all there on the paper, and that made the real estate market. Don't you think? Back in the '60s and '70s,
Definitely. Oh,
it was
yeah.
selling condominiums to everyone, and every housewife was taking classes on how to be a real estate broker, you know. And
it brought the average guy into the investment market too, the average local person. I mean, they could buy their own home, and it made housing less expensive. It was good for everybody.
Yeah, but that kind of investment is not what we have now. I mean, it's not what we're talking about now. We're talking about, you know, like agricultural land, and then you have the GMO problem, and if you're an offshore investor and you want to put a lot of money into land that might be in contention because of GMOs, you're going to regret that. If you want to do a super ferry, well, you know, forget it. I talked to somebody who was on the inside of that, and they said, you know, the really interesting part of super ferry is that it was the state's job in the first place to do the super ferry, to do ferries. If you look, for example, at the Pacific Northwest, you see all these ferries. They're all state authorities that operate the ferries, that spent the money to build the infrastructure, buy the ferries, you know. In this case, it was a private company, and they're the ones that got bashed. And I said to him, I said, you know, who is going to do the next ferry? And he said, no private investor is going to do the next. Wall Street would never come back for that. It'll have to be the state, but the state can't. It won't. It isn't competent to do that. And so, sadly, at least in our vision of things, from this point, you know, in our generation, there won't be a ferry, even though we obviously need one. So many reasons.
Yeah. Oh, you remember we had the ferry in the '70s. We had the hydrofoil.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was not a profitable operation.
Yeah, they had technical problems that they couldn't overcome. But this ferry, you know, was operating, right? It was operating. People were enjoying it.
Pitiful.
Yeah, so, and then of course TMT, as you mentioned, TMT is really the worst example of any of this, where you have $2 billion of university money from a consortium around the world of scientists seeking science, seeking astronomical discovery in the world for the benefit of humankind, but no. And who went through the whole process and got the permit, did everything they had to do, got the permit. The permit doesn't count.
It seems like the opposition is gaining momentum too.
It does.
And they're being funded by the Campbell estate heir. I saw that in the paper that she gave them some money to help pay for all their expenses, and it's nuts.
Anyway, so if you have these offshore investment problems, you know, the resistance to offshore investment and the scary stories, then you probably have fewer investors out there who are willing to engage with us. So I put the question to you, do we have enough offshore investment in Hawaii? Could we use more?
Well, I would say that I think we do have enough offshore investment in Hawaii, but we don't take care of it. I mean, I suppose we could always use more, but you know, if we took care of the Monsanto and TMT and these other projects, if we treated them properly, we'd be fine.
So what does that mean? Does that mean give them the rule of law, give them a reasonable experience in engaging with government agencies on process and permits?
I guess it means to me that we don't let the vocal minority determine what our community is going to do. That our representatives in the legislature recognize that the majority is in favor of these projects. That, you know, once they do follow the rule of law, they should be permitted to proceed and not be shut down by a small vocal group.
Yeah. Well, let's move to the other side of that coin, because, you know, there have been a lot of investors come into Hawaii and they want it sterile. They don't want to have to dirty their hands. They don't want to have to engage with the local community. They don't want to have to give to the local Boy Scouts, none of that. They want to come in and clip coupons, that's all. Very, very sterile. And I guess they were personified by the Reits, real estate investment trusts, which are huge in this country, in the world now, these days.
Yeah. Every country, every large country has its own form of a REIT.
Yeah.
Our REIT laws is, particular our country, it is a tax election on the U.S. code, but most other large countries have their own form of real estate investment trust.
Yeah. So the problem is, in a state that has, what do we call it? It's a land-based economy still today, for sure. Notwithstanding Linda Lingle's hope for an innovation economy, it never went there. And so the REITs can come and buy huge tracts of land, and then they can raise rents. And the raising rents is easy in a state which is used to raising rents, right? That has this whole mechanism, a whole industry, a whole appraisal system built around raising rents. So you come in like that, and you find a lot of ways to raise rents.
It's, it is so unfair to the leaseholders in this state, the way these appraisers have the system rigged in favor of landowners. And I am a landowner, so I'm, financially.
That's what I like about you, Mike.
I'm on the side of.
You're an honest man.
Financially, I'm on the landowner's side, but to be honest, it is so rigged against the tenant. This 8% yield that is assumed to be market is such a joke. And in a time when it probably could be argued it should be 4. I mean, we used to make an argument that it should be 6, but I think you could argue that it should be 4 now, at least for the next 5 years.
The appraisers don't buy that, and the result is the appraisal takes the figure in the lease, or the figure in the lease is confirmed as the rate of return. Is that right? The rate of return that should be obtained on this land, even though there's really no relationship between that and the quality of the land or the revenue producing power of the land.
It's criminal. It really is. It really is. It's a cartel. I mean, it's the appraisers get paid by the big landowners, and it's definitely rigged. And I often wondered how it has stayed out of the courts, or why the courts haven't taken a position on this. I mean, clearly it's unfair.
Courts have really not done their job on that issue.
Right.
And it's still the law that the appraisers can find such high rates. So if I'm a REIT and I come in and I buy a large tract of land and take advantage of the language in these leases, which are historic and always favor the landlord, and the tenant really can't, they have long-term leases, it's very hard to break that, to find that, to find that illegal in some way. So the result is that the process just raises the rents, and small businesses can't pay those rents. And so we lose the small businesses over time. The kid will say to his father, I'm not hanging around for this. I'm leaving town. I'm not going to take your business. I'm not going to continue your business.
That's exactly right.
And the business goes down and out, and then there's no small business, and then the big box retail come and replace that, and everything gets more expensive for the community.
And the net income per household drops because the good job run by the small businessman is gone, and then he's working as an assistant manager in a Costco or a Home Depot.
Right, or both.
Yeah, but as respects the REITs, the REITs, there's only one REIT that I can think of that is involved in that particular issue of land rent. And that's the select income HRPT people. Most
now
REITs,
known as Commonwealth.
Yeah, most REITs own buildings and are renting space to tenants. So the Puna Puna Sand Island folks are just renting land. So that's just peculiar to them.
Okay, we're going to look more at REITs. We're going to see exactly how they're treated, why they're such a popular form of a business entity on the mainland and elsewhere, and why they create a problem for Hawaii here, and what can be done about it. This is a very interesting discussion, and very now, and very relevant, and very important to all of us. That's Mike Fergus of Fergus and Company. I'm Jay Fidell. We're talking about REITs here in Hawaii. We're talking about offshore investments. We're trying to fix the system. You'll see. We'll be right back.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
This is Alice Lee Hagan, host of ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show here at ThinkTech Hawaii is every Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. I bring in interesting guests from Hawaii, the mainland, and hopefully international guests in the future. Do join us on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Aloha.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island in the ER position. Every other Tuesday, I get to host a show here on the ThinkTech program about healthcare. We call it Healthcare in Hawaii. It's really enjoyable for me to bring other healthcare leaders from around the state to talk about our pressing issues. Hawaii has long been the health state, but we need to keep up the momentum, the inertia, and with your help and with your participation, we can come and share all of the big issues that are pressing day to day. Thanks for joining us every Tuesday, alternating weeks from 2 to 2:45.
Yeah.
That it cleaned up.
Okay, we're back, we're live, we're here, and guess what? Peter Savio has joined us. He was in the wings there. He heard the discussion between Mike, Fergus, and me, and decided he really had to participate in this conversation. Hi, Peter.
Hi, how you doing?
As Peter Savio of Savio Realty, been in the real estate development business since 1812. Yeah.
Just about, yeah.
So we're talking about REITs. You know about REITs?
A little bit.
Yeah, okay. What is a REIT? Exactly why is a REIT different from all other forms of real estate holdings?
Well, why don't I answer that question?
Okay,
for
you
Peter?
answer that question.
I used to be a CPA. Peter has always been in the real estate field, so
Okay.
even though we're buddies, I do the
He's
technical.
smarter than me.
He's better explaining it, but I know the details. So a REIT is a corporation like any other corporation that makes an election on its tax return to be taxed as a REIT. The REIT law goes back to 1960. That's when Eisenhower signed it. And basically what they were trying to do was create a system where they could eliminate double taxation and a system that would allow the small investor to get in and a system that eliminated double taxation. So the typical corporation, there's a corporate income tax inside the corporation, then they pay a dividend, and the dividend is taxed also. That's your two levels of taxation. So they said, can we come up with a system for the community where we tax it only once? So they came up with this concept of giving the corporation a tax deduction for any dividends that it pays, and then the dividends would just be taxed once at the shareholder level. And that's what we have today, and virtually all the states adopted that rule.
That's like a partnership, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a partnership, except that the difference in this case is that every entity that does business in Hawaii files a tax return in Hawaii and pays income tax in Hawaii, but not a REIT. A REIT, once the dividends are paid to the shareholders pay taxes on the dividend in the state they live in. So it moves jurisdictions. It moves the income to different jurisdictions. But you know, a C Corp or a subchapter S or an LLC or a trust, none of these things move jurisdictions.
So a REIT is different, and
Yeah.
it's better for the owners of the REIT for that reason.
Well, it shifts the income. Yeah, it's better for the owners of the REIT, and it only has one level of tax. But the problem that I have with it is that it moves income from one state to another. And smart guys like me, figure out that, hey, I could actually have my property owned inside of a C Corp and domicile it in Washington State where there's no income tax, and set up a little Reit with my friends and family and not pay any income tax at all, any state income tax.
I think there's one thing you haven't mentioned, which I think we should cover, is that you're talking in general about federal tax, okay? And so, but then you're talking about state tax.
Federal and state.
So we can't change the federal tax law right here.
But the state
We can
adopted,
change the state tax.
But the state adopted the federal code. And if the legislature would just change the provision that says REITs will pay taxes in Hawaii, you gotta remember, the stockholders take the dividends and pay the state tax in California or New York. They're paying a state tax. They're just not paying it in Hawaii.
Right.
And a state like Hawaii, where we have so many REITs, so much of our real estate is owned by REITs, we're losing $60 million in taxes every year that is being paid in California, New York, and other states. We don't get the benefits.
Okay, so you can't change the federal law.
Can pay this, change the
But you
state
can change
law.
the state law, and Hawaii has a pretty substantial income tax, so that if you change the state law and you tax the REIT income here in Hawaii under Hawaii income tax law,
Right.
corporate income tax law, that's a fair, what'd you say, $60 million?
I think we've estimated it around $60 billion.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Okay, so now, I mean, we haven't done that, obviously. The question is the way it works right now, where it passes through both federal and state to other states, the way you mentioned, Mike, is that fair? And how unfair is it and why?
Well, let me go, I didn't quite answer your first question, and then I'll answer that.
Okay.
So to qualify as a REIT under the federal law, you have to have 100 shareholders, and you have to have 75% of all your assets as a corporation, 75% of your assets, and 75% of your income has to be invested in real estate. And let me see, there's another rule.
Pay out 95.
Oh yeah, they have to distribute 90% of their taxable income as
To their stockholders.
Yeah, they have to distribute it. So the reality is since you have depreciation, you have more cash flow than you have taxable income. So it's easy to distribute 100% of your net taxable income. So REITs don't pay taxes. So that's how it works. That's the reality of it. People get confused and think they get taxed on 10%. They don't. They distribute enough so they don't pay any income taxes. And yeah, so then just to get into the federal law, this works really well for the federal government. The federal law, it doesn't matter what state you're in, you're going to pay the federal tax on REIT dividends, right? If you have a shareholder that's a foreign corporation, the IRS requires the REIT to withhold on the dividend.
Other country.
From other countries. So the feds are smart. They get 100% of their tax on the REIT income. For the states, you've got 7 states that don't have any income tax at all, right? And so and then you have all these different tax rates. Ours is the second largest in the nation. It appears to be dropping this year. At the end of this year, it appears to be going back from 11 to 8. But so the states, most states have adopted the REIT bill, except for New Hampshire. They actually adopted it and then voided it, and so they are actually taxing REITs at the state income tax level. But it's pretty easy to shift income now from one state to another. In Hawaii, we have more REITs per capita, per citizen of Hawaii, more REITs per capita than any other state in the nation by 20%. And the reason is that we're a small state with a huge tourism industry, and the tourism industry gives us all the hotels and the shopping centers that go along with it.
It's land-based.
It isn't really servicing our local community, it's servicing all these visitors. So per capita, we have so much real estate. So we have more REIT per capita than any other.
It raises an interesting question. I always ask myself, when you see these numbers in the newspaper about how room rates are up, room rates are down, amount they spend per day or whatever is up or down, and all that, number of tourists up or down, I don't think they're telling you the real story. The real story is, if it's up, we don't have any benefit of it because there's no state tax on it, except the, what is it, the hotel transient accommodations tax and real property tax. But the real metric of their business is going offshore without any taxation by us.
I think when I grew up, you know, and again, a local boy born in Hilo, but when I grew up, almost all of our companies were locally owned. All the wealth that was created stayed in Hawaii, was reinvested in Hawaii. Today, almost none of our major assets are locally owned. And more are being sold to off-island investors, particularly Reits. And what happens now is all the profits are leaving the state. So our economy is actually hollowing out. And as they buy,
the middle class is going away.
we're going, well, I don't want to say going away, we're just paying more taxes. Everybody is paying more taxes. We're a state that never seems to have enough money to do what has to be done, yet we're allowing the Reits to take 60, 70, probably $100 million out every year, pay no taxes, and then our tax dollar for Hawaii is actually being paid in California or, you know, New York or, you know, Michigan or, I mean, it's in another state. And to me, I cannot believe our legislature doesn't see the advantage of taxing the Reits. And of course, the Reits say, well, we won't come to Hawaii, we won't do business in Hawaii. It's all shabai. Our economy is so strong, our real estate market is so strong, the dynamics are so strong, the scarcity is so strong, they're gonna stay. And paying an 8% state tax or something is nothing for them.
You kind of answered the question, but I mean, I assume that you have defined Reits as much as you want to, Mike. Because the next question
let me just say, there's three types of REITs, I would say. There's a standard REIT that, like General Growth, that is, you know, basically what Congress intended, you know, to have a lot of different shareholders, thousands of shareholders, and that's the way Congress intended it to be. And then there is a private REIT. Like Peter and I could own a company and our family, and we could set it up as a REIT with.
It doesn't have to be a public company.
Doesn't have to be. It could, as long as we had 100 shareholders and met the other rules. And then there's what we call a captive REIT. A captive REIT is a very sinister creation of attorneys, and basically what it is it's like any company can set, even though they're like publicly traded, they're not a REIT, but they can have a little captive subsidiary that's a REIT. And what they do is, essentially, it's structured just entirely to not pay state income tax. That's its only function, is to not pay state income tax. So they get 100 shareholders from their friends and family, take 99.9% of the stock, domicile it in a corporation in a state that doesn't pay income tax, like Washington or Nevada, and they basically eliminate all their income tax liability. And you know, Walmart did it. Howard Hughes did it. Howard Hughes, if I can diverge a little bit, Howard Hughes put out this press release of how awesome they were. They're going to donate $1 million to a foundation for the benefit of our community. At the same time, they were creating this captive REIT, and just for the sole purpose of not paying our largest charity in the state itself, to not pay them the income tax they were due. At least $3 million. It's in their annual statement. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up.
Tell you what
I actually read it in the
is.
footnotes.
Yeah.
And they're saying, oh yeah, we're giving $1 million to charity, and they're scamming us out of $3 million.
Well, but you know, what about that argument that REITs, offshore investment REITs like that, really don't make much of a contribution to the community? They really don't support the Boy Scouts, and they don't handle all the charitable obligations. Call it noblesse oblige. You know, the power of the landowner to help the tenant.
Actually, I think in Hawaii, the Reits actually do tend to probably be a little more sensitive to donating to local charities, because local style is you do that. And if you say no, you get kind of a bad rap for it. But the reality, I think, is what Mike says, you know, so they give $1 million to charity, but they avoid $3 million or $5 million or $10 million in taxes. It's not balanced. So that means you're paying more taxes, I'm paying more taxes, the bus driver, the truck drivers are paying more taxes.
And we, you and me and Mike, we have to pay those taxes in order to support the expenditures of the state and keep the place going.
Right.
We're filling in the void left by the Reits.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to do another void for a minute. This is a break. We're going to do a break.
All right.
Okay, we'll come back and then we'll get really into how we can fix this. Okay, It's Mike Fergus of Fergus and Company, Peter Savio of Savio Realty. We're talking about offshore investments in Hawaii, and particularly investments made by Reits. It's all part of the discussion, I think, that we had last Thursday about offshore investment in Hawaii. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. We'll talk about, what to do, okay?
Inspired by an ancient culture, classical Chinese dance, vigorous physicality, timeless stories, 5,000 years of Chinese music and dance. Shen Yun presents authentic Chinese culture. Coming to Blaisdell Concert Hall, May 8th and 9th. Tickets at shenyun.com or call 808-792-3919.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Mike Fergus and Peter Savio talking about Reits, among other things. So during the break, Mike, you mentioned that you and Peter are not exactly on the same page about that.
Well, I have a more dire view. I think that, I don't think that we're talking not just about Reits, but we're also talking about all the big box stores and all these outside businesses that come in and dominate our market. And no, they don't even get close to performing their duty in our community. And I talked about this at our panel hearing, but basically, their executives are given the task of maximizing profits for the shareholders, right? And that's their fiduciary duty. So they do that. So they, when it comes to supporting charities, charities are supported by individuals, in my opinion, not really corporations. I mean, you see some corporate donations, but the big bucks comes from wealthy individuals, and we don't have that many wealthy individuals in our community. But I would argue that that in terms of charitable giving, if you compared the charitable giving relative to sales and profits of Walmart, you would find that our local business like Foodland would give exponentially more to our community than Walmart if they had comparable sales and profits.
And that's the point I was drawing at before. I mean, that makes it all the worse that the REITs aren't paying taxes like maybe they should, and they're not making contribution or the same level of contribution to local charities. So I put it to you, that's not fair. And it doesn't help us. And I agree absolutely with what Mike said, is they would still come even if they had to pay taxes. Or was it you, Peter?
Same idea.
They would still come even if they pay, because this is a lush market for them, and will continue to be even if they pay taxes. So you guys have been attending to a bill that's in the legislature right now that is intended to fix that. So what is the bill, and what is its pros and cons? What is its status?
Well, the bill effectively would eliminate the dividends paid deduction that Reits have. So that is how Reits are able to avoid paying income taxes. They get a tax deduction for their dividends paid, as I said earlier. The bill would eliminate that so that Reits in Hawaii, just in Hawaii, would be taxed like any other corporation, like Alexander and
Same
Baldwin,
rates, everything.
Bank of Hawaii. That's 6.4% is the corporate income tax and a 4% capital gains rate. And we estimated, based on our studies, that's maybe $20 to $50 million of revenue a year. But one of the things that we haven't talked about is how much the REIT investments is growing. The REITs are growing because they have a net advantage over other businesses, right? Because they have a lower cost of capital. Because people, the average guy is willing to invest in a REIT, put his capital in a REIT to get a 3% dividend, which is basically like an effective interest rate that the REITs can borrow at. So they're able to come in and buy Ala Moana Shopping Center. Well, our own local company, Alexander and Baldwin, was the #2 bidder, as I recall, on that. And the same with Victoria Ward. The GGP guys came in and they bought Victoria Ward when A&B had been working on acquiring it, and they were the #2 bidder on that also. in both cases, the REITs had a lower cost of capital. So we're subsidizing that by making them essentially exempt from income tax. So we're subsidizing these outside businesses, allowing them to come in here and dominate our real estate market.
So your bill would change the state income tax, state corporate income tax law to apply that income tax to REIT income,
Right.
both ordinary income and capital gain.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, and that makes it the same deal as a Hawaii company would pay.
Correct.
That would net somewhere, what'd you say, 25, 50, 60 million dollars?
And we fight about that all the time. I think it's between 50 and 100 million.
Okay, but I mean, that's really, when you think about it, it's a drop in the bucket, right? It's not that much money.
It isn't that much.
Compared to the amount of money that's leaving, you know, to the REITs in other states.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so where is that bill and who's arguing what about it?
Well, it was introduced in the House by Sylvia Luke, and it was introduced in the Senate by Donna Mercado Kim. And the House bill got killed, and the Senate bill survived, and it went to Ways and Means, and the Ways and Means chairwoman determined that she wanted a study done to determine how much revenue was going to be raised and what effect it was going to have on Hawaii investment. And then it was passed back to the House, and Sylvia got it through to conference. It's in conference right now, and hopefully the study will be done. And the REITs have been a formidable ally. They've got all of their, all their employees and all their co-investors and contractors to submit testimony against the bill. And who is in favor of the bill? Well, probably everybody in our community, but they don't know about it. So we've been trying to get the word out, and Peter and I have been honchoing it, and we probably had 50 items of written testimony in support of our bill, which really blew the legislature away. We had so much strong support, strong folks in our community. Well, we had Franklin Tokioka and Marshall Hung and Don Horner and J.D. Wadham, a lot of well-known and respected investors.
Well, I mean, if you were a local business person, it's easy. You would support this bill. There's no downside whatsoever to it. You're not going to lose their investment. We know that. At the same time, the state gains a fair amount of money. Exactly how much we don't know, but a fair amount of money that it can apply to all those unfunded liabilities out there and all that charitable giving it should be doing.
Right.
So for anybody local, this is a good bill. But the REITs, they know how to lobby. I'm questioning to you is, do they have lobbyists working on this?
They do. They have lobbyists and good lobbyists. And I'm a neophyte. This is the first time I've ever, been to the legislature and worked on anything. So it's all completely new to me. And Sylvia Luke told me, she said, "Geez, Mike, it's cute how naive you are about the political process." Well, yeah. So that I was like last year. I think we were dead in the water from day one. I didn't even know it. I worked on it all year, and somebody had determined that bill was going to die. This year, we're working with Joe Suki now, and he said, "Geez, I wish you'd come to me earlier. I didn't really know this. People don't understand this. The people at the legislature, they don't get it. You explain it to them, and there's a few that get it right away, but the majority don't, and they don't want to ask questions about it. They don't want to try to understand it.
It's tax, it's complicated.
But if you keep hitting them numerous times, and finally it starts sinking in, and they start understanding it, and then I think they would become supporters if I could get them to understand it.
Okay, well, we're going to try to help right here. So, Peter, I mean, what are the real political realities around this bill? I mean, do you think that a guy like you guys, Mike and you, have a chance on this?
I actually think there's a very good chance the bill will succeed. I was disappointed it didn't succeed this year. Even where they say they're going to do the study, I kept on saying, well, fine, change the law and do the study. And if it's wrong, then you can change it. But at least you get the 20 million, the 50 million, the 60 million for the 2 years you're doing the study. Why not error so that the local taxpayers benefit, rather than error so the REITs continue to be tax-free? And I was hoping that they'd sit there and go, wow, we need money. That's not a bad idea. We'll do it for 2 or 3 years. Because when they do the study should show that it does not help the state. It does not help the people of Hawaii. To ship our tax revenue to another state is crazy. We need the money.
If you had the change in place, and you did a study while the change was in place, the study would be a much more definitive study,
Correct.
wouldn't it?
You know exactly
Your
what
real
it was.
data, you have
It
real
would be
data.
real data.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they should do. If they, you know, if they're really looking at the best interest of the people of Hawaii, that's what they should have done.
Okay, well, so we have a couple of minutes left, and before we actually close, I want you to tell either the people, you make a pick. Maybe one of you should talk to the people, and the other should talk to the legislature. Who wants to talk to the legislature?
Well, let me talk to the legislature,
Okay,
because
all right.
the Reits argue that they have two arguments against this bill. One is that it is
That's your camera right over there.
subject, that it'll make the investment subject to double taxation. And there is an element of truth to that. But the idea is we have more investment per capita in our state than any other state. And but the Reits would argue, yeah, but we have local investors that are owning REIT stocks that are benefiting from this single taxation concept. Well, we have more investors, more REIT property owned by REITs than any other, I mean, per capita than any other state in the nation. But we are in the lowest quintile of household income, inflation-adjusted household income in the nation. We're like 45th out of 50. So we don't have a lot of REIT investors. We don't benefit from that. And so, you know, that whole, you know, the concept of a, you know, a balancing benefit, I don't buy. And you know, the double taxation issue, you know, it's like, who cares? Like double taxation. Hawaii needs to get its share of income earned in Hawaii. You know, if I buy, or Peter buys, like an industrial park, we pay property taxes, then we pay general excise tax on the income, and then we pay state income tax on the income, then we pay federal income tax on the income, then we pay Obamacare tax on the income, and then if we're lucky enough to live long enough, we die, and they take a federal and state share. Like, we're taxed like 7 times on the same income, and these guys, they don't even want to pay one round of decent income taxes to our state.
It's not really double taxation anyway, because they get a deduction when they calculate, you know, their bottom line, right? For the amount of tax they paid the state of Hawaii.
Yeah, the state of Hawaii expense, it is an expense, so it reduces their taxable income.
So they're not really paying tax twice, right?
Well, I think they do pay tax twice to a smaller extent.
Okay. All right, last one. Now you're going to talk to the people. Peter, you are a man of the people.
To the people, I'd sit there and say, we're getting ripped off. We're losing tax revenue, and we're all paying more taxes because we're not taxing the REIT. So call your legislature and tell them, hey, brah, tax them. Tax the REIT.
Okay? If not this year, then next.
Yeah.
That's Peter Savio on my far right, my far left, and Mike Fergus right next to me. We're talking about offshore investment in Hawaii, particularly with regard to the REITs and a bill that they have been working on in the legislature. Thank you very much, gentlemen, on all the levels. Aloha.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.